Jesus. Enough's enough. Get this crap off of my car. Welcome to Dirt, Sweat, and Gears and the monument of momentumless motor cars. We are here with the Pavarotten, my 1976 Camaro Rally Sport that was originally owned by my grandmother. It had left the family in 1994 and has sat abandoned under a tree with the window down for 30 years. We got it back about 10 months ago, but between endless construction on my garage, other projects that were more important, and major life events, progress on this has been a little bit slow, but today we're hoping to change that. Now, if you've been following this project, we did a will it start video, and sometimes the answer to that is no. Sometimes it requires a lot more work than just simply pouring fuel into the float bowl and turning it over. In this case, the starter was seized up. The car was in a really bad spot, so I couldn't replace the starter. The entire engine was covered in fecal matter, so working on it was not a really good idea. And the carburetor had to be rebuilt. You would pour fuel into it, and it would immediately end up on the intake manifold. So in this video, we're going to address all of that, and I've got a tool for retapping that spark plug hole that I've found out that a lot of people don't really know about. So we're going to try to use that new tool to tap the spark plug hole for the cross-threaded spark plug in, I don't know if this is the number 8 or the number 4, but it's the really hard one. We're going to start with the carburetor. Now, this car has a Rochester quadrajet. It's a very common carburetor, one of the most common in the world. So it shouldn't be that difficult to rebuild. In fact, I've watched some videos, so I have kind of pre-prepared. I've already got a rebuild kit. So let's head on over to the workbench, and we're going to start rebuilding this quadrajet. I am not going to do a how-to rebuild on this quadrajet. For one, I have no idea what I'm doing. This is my very first time opening one of these up. And two, there are much better how-to videos by people that are much more experienced with rebuilding these things. So I'm going to put a link in the description of the videos that I found helpful for rebuilding this. And we're just probably going to do a time lapse. But let's just take a look at what we have in front of us here. This looks pretty similar to the videos that I saw on how to rebuild it. It's pretty gummed up here. There's going to be a lot of cleanup to do. And it looks like there's some caps on top of the adjustment screws. We've got some vacuum ports that need to be blocked off. We're not going to use this when it comes time to actually smog this car. We're going to go with an EFI by then. But before we do that, I want this working so that we can have some functionality out of this car. I want it to start and run, and in order to do that, we need a carburetor. But I don't want to spend $2,000 just to answer the question, will it start? So we're going to reuse this. We're going to clean it up, and oh my God, it is so bad. We're going to clean this up. We're going to rebuild it, and it's going to be at least usable while we fix up the rest of this car. Well, I finished rebuilding the carburetor, and man, it looks amazing. Just kidding. I bought this off a guy in Burbank for $100. He actually had 2 quadrajets for sale for $100, and he, it was really cheap. And these are definitely usable. And he just said he was just happy to see it going to a good home. And that's what building a community is all about. You help each other out. You sell things for reasonable prices. You don't gouge people out of money because you're looking to become a millionaire. He also, by the way, had a pair of heads that he said he's going to sell me for $300. And I may take him up on that because $300 is cheaper to buy his pair of completely done heads than it would be to rebuild the heads that I have. So I very well may be taking a trip back down to see him. So I'm really, really grateful that there are still good people out there in this world. So we have this quadrajet. It is basically ready to go. So this has a different choke mechanism on here. It really doesn't bother me. I don't think that's going to be a problem whatsoever because this is really just for testing purposes. Before we go to smog this car, we're going to put an EFI on that. But I don't want to do that until I get it running the way it was initially wired to do because I want to remove as many variables as possible as I'm putting this car together. Let's see if we can back tap this head. I've already ripped out the HVAC system. Turns out all you had to do was literally rip it out. That was not that big of a deal. We're going to replace this thing with a more compact solution anyway. This old HVAC is not something we want to use. It's just, it's enormous, it's inefficient, and there are better solutions. So we're going to ignore that for now and continue working on the engine. I want to retap the hole in the head, the spark plug hole, and I have a really neat tool that I recently learned about that I didn't know existed to do that with. This is what's known as a back tap. The idea is you stick this into the hole, and as you're tightening it, it will actually open up the tap here, and as you're pulling it out, it will retap the holes. And the benefit to this is, for this type of application, is that the metal shavings will make their way out of the cylinder head instead of going in. So let's get a little bit of grease on this and see if it's going to work. All right, that's pretty snug. So we're going to go ahead and run this out. So I happen to have a much better angle on the spark plug now. It's going, is it going in? I think it's, yes, it is going in. Yeah. Oh my God. What a great tool. I'm really, really grateful for the advice. Thank you so much, Chris, for recommending this back tap. I didn't know that existed. And apparently not a lot of people do either because nobody recommended this in the comments when I stripped this out 5 months ago. Next thing I want to tackle is the intake manifold because I have no idea what's under here and looks like we've got, just from this vantage point, a fair bit of rot. So I have a whole new manifold, which means we got to take pretty much everything around here off. We got to take the distributor off. We got to take this bracket. Well, this bracket goes to the brake booster, which isn't even hooked up. There's a lot of things that are just broken right off on this car. We do have to take this bracket off because there's the cable, throttle cable is here. What else do we have to take off? We have to disconnect this vacuum assembly, which I'm sure does amazing things for this car. And that's it. It should be just a few bolts once I get this off. It looks like the valve covers need to come off because the lip of the valve cover looks like it's interfering with the edge of the manifold. Which, if you're a GM guy, you're looking at that going, duh, you idiot. You should have been doing that. This is the first thing you should have done. I know. I am an idiot. I have no idea what I'm doing. So, you know, could make shitty comments, or you could be helpful. And by the way, I do know a lot of really good, helpful people that have been amazing at helping me figure out what to do with this car and how to approach things. And, you know, it's not all internet trolls, surprisingly. Oh, that is disgusting. Basically the same story over here too. It's getting into an oil passage. That's fun. Oh, you're heavy. So this right here, this is why you don't start up a car after having it sit for 30 years. This right here. And there's a lot of this. If you start the car up without cleaning out this is going to get everywhere you don't want it to be. I don't know if this motor is garbage or not, but this is going to inform my decisions going forward. So I'm going to try to clean up all of that crap before it gets deeper into the oil passages. And then we've obviously got to drain the oil to see what that looks like, because that's really bad. So I'm told this is actually not as bad as it seems. That chunks of carbon and lots of carbon buildup is really normal for when a car sits for as long as this car has. And my options are either do everything or put it back together just like this. Well, not just like this. I want to clean it first, but put it back together and see what happens. So what we want to do here is we're going to clean everything up as good as we can. Not going to go too crazy, but definitely want to, like, try to vacuum things out, try to, clean this up and some of the passages. And then we're going to drain the oil. We're going to see how the oil looks. If the oil has, all kinds of chunks in it, that might be pretty alarming. But we want to put it back together as is, put new oil in it. We're going to, just run it with distilled water instead of with coolant. That way we don't waste more money there. Before we actually try to start and run it, we want to do another compression check once we replace the starter and, get this all put back together. But the point is here that where we're at right now, we're not really wasting any money other than some oil and some time. So we may as well just clean it up and try to put it back together and see what happens. Because otherwise, we're making a decision to spend a whole lot of money when we really might not need to. Well, since I don't have an intake manifold gasket set, I think the next thing I want to do is drain the oil. While I'm under there, I can probably think about replacing the starter. We know the starter has to be replaced because the one that's on there is completely locked up. I have a new one available, and it should be pretty straightforward to replace. I just have to get the car up a little bit higher so that I can get underneath it safely, and hopefully a bunch of crap, literal crap, doesn't rain down on my face while I'm under the car. So I've drained the oil, and thankfully it actually didn't look that terrible. It was obviously very dark, and it was also very thick, so it may have been, a heavyweight oil, which is probably what we're going to put in it again. But right now, I'm going to do the starter. Since we're down here anyway, the starter is seized, so we're going to replace that. And once we're done with that, we're going to come back up here, and I got to get some gaskets, because I don't have manifold gaskets. I don't have valve cover gaskets. So we're really kind of stuck here until I make that happen. So progress on the Pavarotten has been admittedly a little bit slow. There's two reasons for that. One, I had some major progress both with the Prelude and with the Jeep that I had to work on. The other reason is that I had set out to drop the starter, and while I initially wanted to do that off camera because watching me flail around underneath a car is not really compelling YouTube content, but I ended up having to take off the header, and I started to do some cleanup work, as you can see. We're going to do a lot more cleanup work in the next coming few sequences, but right now we just want to take a look at what we have here. So while I was underneath the car, I noticed there were lots of sticks and leaves and fecal matter on top of the starter, so I did not want to be underneath the car as that thing was dropping down. So that's why I took off the exhaust manifold so that I could clean a lot of that up and, kind of get out of the way. I also wanted easy access to the starter cable and the starter signal wire. Just made everything a whole lot easier, and I learned a little bit more about the car along the way. And you may notice that we have a manifold and carburetor. That's just for decoration because I didn't bolt any of it in. I didn't put any of the gaskets on. So hopefully we're going to get to that pretty soon, but I want to get this resolved first. This is actually kind of exciting. This is the first new part that is actually installed on the car. The Summit Racing starter, this is called a mini starter. It's still kind of big, but it's at least a lot smaller than the original. You see, if we look at the original starter, we have a staggered bolt pattern here, but the starter from Summit Racing has a straight bolt pattern. Now, the block can accommodate that. It did have the hole for the straight across bolt pattern. However, it was filled with junk. So I had to run the tap up in there and clean everything out. But as you can see, it's mounted up. If you look at the flywheel here, there's a few teeth that are a little bit crushed. That does concern me a little bit, but we're not going to be able to address that today. There's no chance. So I'm going to just have to hope that the starter can grab those teeth, that those teeth don't ruin the starter, and we'll just go from there. So next up, after I vacuum this floor, I'm going to start putting the top end back together. I'm going to start with the manifold. Obviously, this manifold isn't going to stay here long term, but in order to hear this thing run, we just need to get it up on there. And apparently, there was no gasket from the factory. Either that or it has been removed and not replaced with a gasket. So it just leaked all over the place. So we're just going to go ahead and roll with that no gasket situation for now, and we'll address it once we know this car will start up. We still have a long way to go here. I was more focused on getting my hands around this thing and figuring out what I need, what I don't need, and what I don't have. So obviously, we have not stabbed the distributor in yet. I'm not concerned about that at this point in time. We've got, I believe this is the oil pressure sending unit. That's going to get replaced, but for now, I just wanted to thread it in there. This is some vacuum thing that is dependent on temperature. The thread does not look to be the same as it was on the old manifold. In fact, it looks like this might go over here and it would block the water pipe. So that's not a good idea either. Moving along here, we have the EGR, and an EGR is going to be a fact of life. This is an emissions-controlled car, and I am hoping to smog it. It's not my biggest priority right now, but it is something that I hope to do to this car. I want to be able to drive it around in California just for a little bit before I send it off to Texas. But clearly, this 50-year-old EGR is not going to do the job. I looked at the diaphragm. It's all cracked up. So this is going to get replaced. This hole here, my other manifold doesn't have it. So this is going to have to get plugged up. New water pipe, thermostat housing. I don't have a thermostat in there right now because I don't want to put one in until I've flushed out all the garbage that's inside this motor. So we're going to leave that open for now and try to flush it out eventually. So the carburetor, we've got an open vacuum in the front, an open vacuum in the back. We've got this thing twisted in here, and I'm just going to have to, remove that with a vice grip. We've got what appears to be a manual choke, but I could be wrong. Correct me in the comments if you know what I'm supposed to do with that. We also have another vacuum port here, another vacuum port, two more down, one more over here, and these are the fuel adjustments. So there is still a lot of work to be done just to even get this thing to try to start up. I haven't put oil in it yet, and still have to put the water pump on, but we're making really good progress, and I am really happy with the way this is looking. There's also a nice list of things for me to pick up for this car now. And so I'm taking this little by little. I've never worked on a Camaro or a 350 before, so I'm learning as I go. If you're watching and you see I do something wrong, go ahead and leave a comment. Even if I know I'm doing it wrong, I'll just write back and say, hey, I know about that. Thank you very much, though, because I don't want to... Obviously, I don't want to do something wrong, but I also don't want to give people the wrong advice. So don't listen to me for advice on how to build this thing because I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm learning as I go. So off camera, I took everything apart again because I realized I made a couple of mistakes while I was putting the intake manifold on. I fixed those mistakes and put everything back together. And while I was at it, I decided to trim some of the washers that I was using to secure the intake manifold down. That's because they were getting very, very close to rounded corners here. This was probably the most extreme example right here. You see how close the bolt gets to this wall of this water output. Or is it input? I'm not sure. It's one of the two. I also have to cap off a lot of these connections on the carburetor and, of course, run fuel. But we don't want to run fuel from the fuel tank. We want to run fuel out of a gas can because I have no idea what's in that fuel tank, and I want nothing to do with it. We have a new fuel line that does need to go on to replace this thing that was hacksawed. I don't know why people do that, but yeah, we got to replace that, and I have no idea if that fuel pump is any good. We're just going to have to find out. So while we wait for those parts to arrive, there is some things that we could try to do. So we have our new starter installed, and while we don't have anything connected, we can probably run power directly to the starter to get it to turn and turn the engine. And if we can do that, we can find out what our compression is. I think that's going to be very useful information, especially at this juncture, because if we've got several cylinders with zero compression, then we need to junk this motor. And I don't want to spend any more money on this until I know if the block is junk. But we can still have a little bit of fun. We can learn some things that will be very useful in this project. So let's give that a try. I have a remote switch that should activate the starter. We can hook that up to the battery. The battery just needs to hook up right here and to the ground, which needs to go, looks like it's supposed to go on the alternator bracket. So I'm going to have to rehang that alternator bracket, and then we'll be able to turn this over and find out what our compression is. Replace the oil filter and fill the engine with oil. And while you don't need to watch me pour new oil into an engine, that's really not exciting. What's really going to be valuable here is the condition of the old oil. So I have my empty bottle of Riley oil. I put this into the engine, not because I care about quality, but because we were just going for cheap. I don't expect this oil to be in this engine for very long because we need to get rid of a lot of contaminants. O'Reilly, if you'd like more high-quality product placement like this, let me know. So let's check the condition of our old oil. It's in my collection tank here. And some of the things we're looking for is metal shavings, soft serve ice cream, that sort of thing. We want oil to be the color of oil. And so far, it looks pretty good. I mean, it doesn't look good in terms of being good oil. It's very much dark oil. It's just dark. It's black. There isn't coolant mixed in with it, so that's really great news. And we may have a healthy engine. The next thing we need to do is get our compression check, and that's going to really tell us a lot of good information. So I was wrong. It wasn't the alternator. It was the water pump. So I'm cleaning up the bolts to hang the water pump. And if you notice, there's a lot of crud on here. And we really want to clean this off before we put this thing on the car, because it's just going to damage the threads, both on the bolt and on the engine block. So what I have here is a tap and die kit. This is an SAE. I got this from my Uncle Doug's toolbox. So I use this tap and die kit to clean up threads. You can spray the threads with some PB Blaster and then just match up the threads that you need for the bolt die, and then you just run it down and run it back up. We've got our PB Blaster, and we're just going to give this just a little spritz here, especially where we need to clean it, because we don't want that to just kind of grind itself into the bolt. So to match up the threads, we got our little gauge here, and I'm pretty sure it's a 16. And what you do is you just line up the threads to the gauge to know what your thread pitch is. And so this is a 16, and that's the thread that we want to tap on here. This is a 3/8 16. There we go. Oh, come on. All right. Let me run it back out. Now, you don't always need to use the tap and die kit to clean the threads. If they're not that bad, you could just hit them with the wire wheel and be done with it. But this one was a little bit questionable, so I wanted to be sure. Now that the threads are clean up, we have to hit the shank. Not really. We don't really have to do much to it, but you can just clean up the rest with your wire wheel. So I have the water pump on, and 3 of the 4 bolts are already done. So let's just stick this thing in, and we're going to run it down. I'm not concerned with getting the fan clutch on or the fan or any of that stuff because, well, for one, we're probably going to modify this with an electric radiator. And 2, we're not even close to running this car long enough to even need cooling. So bear with me if you hear some background noise. Construction noises, that's because there is construction happening. That's kind of what happens when your life is nonstop construction for 10 years. It becomes a lifestyle. We're here on the passenger side, and as you can see, I've taken the exhaust manifold off, and I did that to gain access to the connection points of the starter. So I have this little trigger thing that is going to send power from the battery power to the signal wire, and it's going to click the starter. Just click, click, click. Just to try to get this motor to turn. Obviously, this isn't going to fire because there is no gas. We've got our gas just in case there happens to be any fuel in the lines. It's probably all varnish. It's going to run out of this cut hose and into a bucket just in case. All right, so we got everything secured on our battery tray. Let's see if this works. That was violent. Okay. So we had some alignment issues with the teeth on the flywheel and the starter. And it sounds like we've actually made it through that. And we're sort of having... So we'll take a look underneath at the flywheel because we do have some messed up teeth, and that may be causing this horrific sound that we've got here. It's still pretty violent, but we're starting. I mean, the starter's turning. Okay, now that... I'm seriously like freaking out a little bit. Super nervous. So now that we got this thing turning on command, let's get our compression gauge over here and start taking some compression. So for each cylinder, I'm going to take compression and I'm going to write it down on Notepad. So we've got cylinder 2. Looks like 75. That's not promising at all. Okay, that's better. 100. Yeah, we got about 100 on this one. The spark plug's on the other side because I wanted this thing to turn over evenly. And it sounds much, much better. So let's continue pulling compression. We're going to go back to our cylinder 4 and see what we get. Yeah, 50. That's rough. I mean, it is building. Now it's up to like 75. All right, next one. Cylinder 6. Oh, that one was pretty good. About 100. Number 8. Yeah, 125. Now we're talking. Cylinder 1. I think we're at 125. So we got cylinder 3 here. And it doesn't look good. Yeah, we're at like 65. 5. It's pretty healthy. Yeah, we got like 125. And now cylinder 7. Whoa. That's got to be that grind on the starter. Damn it. So compression on that looked to be 125, which is really good. Let's go take a look at the starter so I can show you the problem that I think I'm having with the flywheel. Funny thing, this is the exact same problem I am having on my Maverick. So this is the flywheel, and you can see the teeth are pretty chewed up. This is going to ruin the starter in short order, and it'll continue to ruin the flywheel really quickly. So this does need to come out. That means we can't continue starting this car for very long. It doesn't look like we have very many starts left because this flywheel is much, much worse than when I last looked at it 20 minutes ago. So we just did a lot of damage to this flywheel, but we learned a lot. And the flywheel was going to degrade anyway. This was going to be a problem. So this experiment was totally worth it. We learned a lot about our block. The most important thing that we learned is that none of them have zero compression. We got a couple that have low compression, like in the 50s, and that could be due to a bad head gasket. That could be a valve issue. It could be stuck rings. Well, I took a break, had some lunch, and did some thinking about this car. That's not a good place to sit. Well, I took a break, had some lunch, and did some thinking about this car. Now, with the flywheel being half gone, it's pretty obvious that the transmission has to come out. But there's just one problem with that. The transmission is covered in rat shit. So I'm not going to be under that car when this transmission comes out. I'm sorry. I'm not as tough as you. If you're going to leave a comment and say, oh, you're scared of the little rat shit, you know what? You're a tough guy, and I'm not. So I'm not going to be under this car when this transmission comes out. So there's only one other way to get the transmission out of the car, and that's with the rest of the engine. So I think that's going to be in our future. Not the immediate future, but definitely soon. The next stage of this build anyway. And that will give me a chance to not only take everything out and clean everything really nicely, but I can take apart the transmission, take apart, replace the flywheel, go through everything off of the car and make sure it's all looks really good before I put it back in. And that'll also give me a chance to think about whether or not I even want to put a 350 in here, because I might want to put a Turbo 400 transmission in here and get that extra overdrive gear. It would make this a much better driving car, especially at freeway speeds. Maybe. In terms of the engine, well, That also means we could do a lot of engine work on a stand and work much more comfortably than trying to have to climb over, the frame rail and all that stuff. And with the engine out, I can do work on the firewall. I can do work on the frame. I can really get this car up to snuff. I can really get this thing sorted nicely. I think we should continue down this road because we're not really wasting money. All of the things that I'm waiting on is stuff that I need regardless of whether or not I pull the motor now or if I do it later. So I think it's in my best interest to just see how far I can take this. Now, the next thing that I really want to do here is verify the oil pressure. So unfortunately, we may not be able to turn this motor over until we pull this motor out and separate it from the transmission. However, we can still see if it's going to give us some oil pressure with this tool. This is another tool that I didn't know existed until just recently. So this thing just shoves right into the distributor hole, and then you hook up a drill to it, and you can turn the oil pump in order to cycle the oil through. So in the videos that I saw of other people using it, they've had valve covers with cutouts. In here, we're not going to do that. We don't want to cut these valve covers just yet because I don't want to order new ones. So what I'm going to do is just hook up the drill. I'm going to run it for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to pull the valve covers off to see where the oil lands. Because the oil is supposed to come out each and every one of the rockers to lubricate them. So if I take the valve covers off and we have a big mess on our hands, I think that's a good sign. I don't know. We'll see. There we go. Seeing some oil come out. I'm seeing it come out here now. So it's really not news that this motor's got to come out, but I really do want to see if it's going to get some oil. Right now, one of the lifters is not getting any oil. All of the other ones some of them are really healthy. A couple of them, namely this one, seems like it's pretty restricted. We haven't even looked at the other side yet, but if this side is bad, that other side's also going to be bad. So I am going to recharge my batteries, give this one more go for another 10 minutes or so, and just going to leave the valve cover on while I do that. That way I don't spill oil all over everything that I just cleaned up. So I'm definitely not going to start it and run it for any amount of time if this lifter has not had any kind of lubrication in the last 30 years. So it's just a non-starter. I mean, in more ways than one. Well, that's fun. I wish I had seen that 10 minutes ago. I guess I get to clean up the Exxon Valdez over here. Yikes. Well, between the chewed up flywheel and our blocked oil passages, I think that's all the information I need to know. I gotta pull this motor. For one, I am not going to be under this car when I pull this transmission because it is covered in rat shit. The motor's got to come out in order to do that. And two, with these blocked oil passages, it's not even worth running this motor for any length of time because it'll explode. I don't want to blow up this motor. It's a perfectly good motor. Well, not perfectly good. It's a ruined motor. Fortunately, I do have another motor up in Lancaster at my Uncle Doug's house, who passed away tragically earlier this year. He has a 350 from this era, and it is complete. It's sitting outside, so it could be locked up, but it definitely has some good parts on it that we can make use of when we come back to this project. But in the meantime, I really have to get a truck on the road because how the hell am I going to get this down to a machine shop in a Miata? It's just too big. I need a truck. And since I sold my Jeep, well, my Jeep wasn't really a truck anyway. So yeah, this really needs to happen. So unfortunately, that does mean I have to set this aside for a little bit. But on the bright side, I get to finally get one of my trucks on the road, and I'm going to have a truck. And I'm really, really excited to have my S10 on the road, and it's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to get a whole lot done once this truck is running. So that's all I've got for you. If you like what you see, hit that like button, share, and please subscribe to my channel. If you don't like what you see, maybe you think I should get under there and pull that transmission, even though it's covered in rat shit. You're a much tougher person than I am. You're a real tough guy, and I salute you. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.